Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Chesley McNeil. You know, each weekday we look at the stories making headlines, but then we bring in the experts from our community to give their take. Here's a look back at some of the top takes from this week and how those in the know are seeing the stories that impact you. We've heard a lot of talk about tort reform during the current session of the Georgia legislature. Changes pushed by Governor Brian Kemp cleared the Senate and now are in the House, but does any of this impact you? That's what we're going to try to find out here. 11Alive News senior investigator Rebecca Lindstrom joins us now and says that it's all about rates, whether you're getting behind a wheel of a car or you're taking out a loan to buy a house. Rebecca, first of all, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It is good to be here.
All right. And can you describe for us, in your words, what tort reform means?
Yeah, because this is definitely a phrase that is getting used a lot right now, and it is just a clunky term. So I want to start with just saying, what is tort reform? I mean, tort reform, it is the changes to our legal process to reduce the number and the cost of civil lawsuits. That's it. That's what tort reform is. And a lot of states, they've passed some kind of tort reform. You might have heard of, what's happening in California or Texas and comparisons being made. But when you look at that definition, you have to understand that tort reform can mean a lot of different things because, again, it's choosing option A or choosing option B in order to reduce the number and the cost of those civil lawsuits. And because of that, even as we're talking about it, it's hard to make those apples to oranges, kind of comparisons and really boil down to what's happening in one state. Is that going to impact what's happening in ours?
So break down for us how our lawmakers are trying to get that tort reform here.
So the proposed bill would change a lot of different things, but here's some of the key elements, such as medical statements. Right now, attorneys can show what a treatment would have cost if the person injured had to pay full price. This bill would say, hey, if you're going to show that, then you need to show what they actually paid, which we know is often a lot less. It would also allow defense attorneys to tell jurors whether you were wearing a seatbelt when you got into an accident. Right now, that is not allowed. The idea there is that if you had worn your seatbelt, your injuries might not have been as severe, and their client shouldn't be responsible for your potentially bad decision. Another thing it would do is it would change who can sue a property owner for negligent security. Another kind of clunky phrase there, but an example of that might be trying to sue the owners of a gas station because you got robbed while pumping gas. You could say, you knew this was a high crime area. Why didn't you have more security there so that I didn't get robbed? Because you had security guards to prevent that.
Gotcha. Okay, so what does this have to do with my insurance premiums?
I mean, because that's really the bottom line we all want to know. Like, if we go ahead and we do all of this, what are we going to get in exchange? So the thought here is that the more high dollar lawsuits insurance companies face, the more that they have to pay out, and then the more we have to pay for insurance. So if we reduce all of that, our insurance rates, they should go down too, right?
Well, our research finds that no, rates never come down when you pass these kinds of laws. The money is going to go into the pockets of the insurance company.
That if only 2 years ago Florida passed its tort reform legislation, that now we're seeing all of this dramatic improvement in this market, which, mind you, Florida is surrounded almost entirely by water. They have a very interesting and costly, insurance market, and they're seeing these results where premiums are coming down.
All right, so we heard the high dollar verdicts mentioned. Do you know how many we've had here in Georgia?
Yeah, so when they're talking about the high dollar verdicts, they like to use this phrase, nuclear verdicts. And according to the report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, from 2013 to 2022, Georgia had 64 nuclear verdicts. So 64 times where a jury said, yeah, they deserve this money, and then awarded a settlement or a jury award that was more than $10 million. And that makes us tied with Illinois for the 5th highest number of cases with jury awards over $10 million. Many of those verdicts, though, do get reduced upon appeal.
Yeah, I think a lot of us would like to see our insurance rates go down. So for the critics, what do they need to do when it comes to this tort reform?
They say more accountability. I mean, you heard the one gentleman there talking about what was happening in Florida and actually seeing those rates come down. There are people who would say, well, maybe they're seeing this short-term benefit, but if you're going to look at it over a period of time, you're going to find that it was more of a wash and that they end up in very similar place as other states that didn't pass some of these tort reform measures. So they say what would really make a difference is accountability. The state, Georgia's own study showed that more people are turning to lawyers when they get injured, and that when they do, they tend to get paid more. So are personal injury lawyers bullying the system, or are insurers forcing people down that path because they're not honoring the policies? And I think that that's one of the other big questions here that's not really being asked.
All right, Rebecca Lindstrom, thank you for that insight. Very good information, really appreciate it. Roughly $3.1 billion will be legally wagered on this year's March Madness tournament. That's up from the $2.72 billion put down on the brackets last year. Again, that's legal betting. It's hard to pin down the illegal betting that will be taking place, but one estimate says around $4.3 billion. All that's with a B, folks. Here now to talk more about it is Monique Garside, psychotherapist based out of Stone Mountain. Monique, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. What's your initial thought or take on these figures?
Yeah, that is a lot of money. And so you think about how exciting it is. But at the same time, we think about how are we doing this responsibly, and what does that look like? And as exciting as it is, we want to make sure we don't cross that line of not being able to adjust when we're too excited.
How strong would you say gambling addiction really is?
I think it's very strong. I think we're just now learning more about it. Gambling addiction, you have some of the same things you would look at if someone who has an alcohol or a drug addiction. It's that chasing that high. It's the same thing, but it looks different. So you can't see a gambling addiction from a person, right? So we look at some of the same things, but it is very high. Those numbers are increasing, and so more awareness is being raised around it.
You mentioned alcohol and drug addiction. When we think about addictions, that's probably the first thing we think about. But how does gambling rate to that?
Yeah, so gambling addiction is the thing about it that's so dangerous for gambling addiction is because one, we sometimes don't take it serious. We don't think that it's a thing. And so then we don't take the proper measures, or maybe we don't support an individual who is struggling with an addiction. And so getting the resources to them or getting the help to them is really important. And so as we're still learning more about it, we have to understand we have to tackle it just the same type of resources that we would pour into a substance or drug addiction is the same type that we would do for gambling addictions.
Monique, I can't say I've never wagered anything with a friend or something like that. You may be sitting at a bar watching a game or something like that, and you say, hey, man, I bet you the Sixers are going to win tonight, and it's maybe $1 bet, that kind of thing. What are the signs that someone may be going a bit too far with it?
Yeah, so you look at someone who has maybe loss of impulse control, someone who is willing to, they don't care about the risk anymore. They're going to continue to bet, and they're going to get into issues such as like financial trouble. Someone, maybe they are so hyper-focused on it, they have these compulsions that they may not be looking at things in a clearer way. So their judgment is going to be off a little bit, and they're going to be willing to risk things like their family, their job, their finances. So someone who doesn't really have control over that behavior.
So what's the best way to deal with it?
So one of the things is to get support. So you can get support in multiple ways, whether it's being honest with your family and your friends, maybe having someone for accountability, having an accountability partner, setting your limits. So, what's that limit from going to a friendly wager to now we are stepping outside of something that we can control? Looking at creating boundaries. So maybe you say, you give yourself a limit of how much you do it. You look at that. And then maybe just looking at when you feel like you might be getting a little bit out of control, and maybe when you feel like you can't control it, then seeking help. So whether you go to friends and family, whether you go to a therapist, but knowing when it's time for you to go and get help.
When you say set a limit, well, I mean, and nobody knows really how much somebody's making or what they can bring in or whatever, but,
right.
And I've never, I'm $1. You know what I mean? That's about all
Right. But even time-wise, so if you're saying, okay, I'm going to give myself, 5 minutes, whether you're using an app or whether you're somewhere in a space, right? Giving yourself some time, say, okay, you know what, win or lose, I'm going to walk away. And being able to say that. It's when we have trouble saying it's time to walk away is when we get a little bit across that line.
Gotcha. All right. So I have to ask you, did you fill out your bracket?
I have not put on my bracket yet, but we are a Duke household, so it's going to be on our bracket.
Okay, all right. And what's your limit about? You $5, $10? What's your limit?
I give it a couple times. My limit is real low. My limit is very low.
Okay. So
I don't like to lose, and so I'm just like, all right, I didn't win that round. That's it. I'm done.
All right. Just one last question. Who you got winning it all? Who do you see hoisting the trophy? Do you have a favorite, or you just
Yeah. So we're biased. We're Duke House here.
Okay,
So
okay.
we are, we're watching, we're hoping, crossing our fingers.
All right. Monique, really appreciate your insight. Thank you for all that information about gambling. Really appreciate it. All right, let's get it. A global group of economists now predicting President Trump's tariff policies will slow economic growth in the United States and around the world and send prices even higher. The group of nearly 40 of the most wealthiest nations made new economic forecasts that are noticeably worse than previous predictions. It predicts the U.S. economic growth will slow dramatically this year and next, while U.S. inflation will begin to pick up this year. One nation that's locked in a trade war with the United States right now is Canada. Yesterday, the nation's prime minister met with leaders from Britain and France, seeking support from two of Ottawa's most oldest allies. He says that he will not sit down with President Trump until the U.S., as he says, is ready for a more comprehensive discussion on trade and security. Here now to explain Canada's true economic impact here on Georgia is Christopher Fagan. He's a partner at Moore Coulson, based right here in Atlanta. He leads the agency's transaction advisory practice area. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Morning.
All right, let's talk about Canada's relationship with the United States and how much the United States rely on its neighbors to the north.
Yeah, what most people don't realize until the trade war actually happened is that Canada is actually the U.S. largest trading partner. Currently, there's about $401 billion of imports from Canada, resulting in about $131 billion trade deficit that we have, which is why the administration has found this to be important to fight this war.
Speak of some of those trades. I think that some of our viewers may not know how much or what kind of things we trade with Canada.
Yeah, they're primarily steel, aluminum, farming products, things of that nature are what we're currently trading.
Here in Georgia, we're several hundred miles away from crossing that border. How much of an impact does it have right here in our state?
It has significant impact, actually. Georgia is a large trading partner as it relates to farming products, and those products are our largest export, actually, to Canada.
How much, what are some of those everyday things that we would, be surprised by or would go to the counter and find out higher prices on because of this issue?
So things such as cans, Coca-Cola, food products, things of that nature are things that will really feel the impact of the trade.
Give me your take on maybe how long this could last or how long the spat could go on, or do you even think things could get better down the road?
Well, what we know about the administration that's different than other administrations is we have a previous history. We've seen how they've handled this the last time Trump was president. And what we know is that we have short-term pain that's going to happen, and eventually it'll get worked out. However, consumers are going to feel price increases on these things in the short term.
Give me your prediction on how long this will take. You're saying that you think it will get worked out, but will it be for the entire administration of Trump and then somebody else comes in and it gets better, or what do you think?
If you think about last time, China was the primary target of the tariffs, and it took almost 3 years to get that worked out.
Wow. Are there any other areas? We talk about Canada a lot, but there's also trade wars going on, as you mentioned, with China and other places. How much of an effect do they have on right here in Georgia?
Well, Mexico is Georgia's second largest trading partner behind Canada. China's third, and all three of those are currently in the crosshairs. So we expect to see impacts from those as well.
Oh, man. All right. So this could be ongoing. Christopher Fagan, appreciate you coming on the show. And, of course, we'll have you back as things get worse or maybe even get better. Let's hope they get better.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Really appreciate you. If it seems like everybody in your house is sick right now, well, guess what? You're not alone. Parents have been struggling through this rough virus season and keeping their children's toys and clothes germ-free. You know, it's been more important than ever now. I'm here to help us to make sure everything is not just clean, but also sanitized, disinfected, is Jariah Rodriguez, a review analyst with Consumer Reports. Good morning to you, Jariah.
For having me. Good morning.
All right. Let's get started with, how much of us know or can tell the difference between what's clean and what's sanitized?
It's a complicated question, but it's The Environmental Protection Agency actually has a really simple answer for us. Cleaning removes dirt and debris from the surface of objects. Sanitizing kills bacteria, but not viruses. And then disinfecting is what kills both bacteria and viruses on the surfaces of objects.
All right, and so what should we use to get that deep clean in there?
Right. So the thing is, we expect that people, like the experts, would tell us to sanitize our kids' toys all the time, but that isn't the case. They actually say that for the most part, regular cleaning is enough. The only times that you really need to disinfect or sanitize is if your kids have been sick or someone else in the home has been sick, if you wear shoes in the house and those toys have been on the floor, or if there's any sticky hands that have been touching those toys.
Okay, let's move the clothes. Like how often should we be washing them, or is the regular way of washing them enough?
So we recommend, our laundry experts recommend, that you use cold water for all of your washing. You do want to separate your children's clothing, however, and wash that in their own wash cycle, not with the adults' clothes. And if you're shopping for new clothing, you want to wash that clothing before you put it on your children for the first time, always. Even like socks, hats, anything you can think of, just make sure you're giving them a wash before you put them on your kids.
All right, so I understand you're saying wash kids' clothes separately. And maybe I'm wrong thinking this, but it seems like kids would be more germier than we would be. Am I wrong?
You would think so, because kids are in school and they're sharing things with their friends, probably not washing their hands as much as they should. But I think kids are also in contact with different germs than adults may be. Okay. When we're going to work and we're taking public transportation, maybe. Depending on what sort of sector that we're working in, maybe we have people who work in construction, and those are different debris that we don't want to transfer onto our kids' clothes.
Gotcha. Okay, so what if you have a multiple age household where you have maybe a baby, then you got a toddler, or maybe an older child? Should all those be different? Should it be 3 separate, washes?
I'd say the baby clothes absolutely goes in their own wash cycle. For the older children, the toddlers who have more developed immune systems, you can go ahead and wash all that clothing together.
Gotcha. Is there any kind of detergent that we need to be focused on? What should we focus on and what should we avoid?
Yeah, so absolutely. For kids, especially younger kids, babies, or anyone in the home who has allergies or very sensitive skin, you want to use something that's hypoallergenic or fragrance-free. Just make sure to take a look at those ingredients on the back, because fragrance is such a allergen, especially for young children.
Is there a one clean for all when it comes to the toys? Obviously, toys have different textures, different materials, that kind of thing. What do you use to clean the kids' toys with?
So for the most part, all you need is a mix of some dish soap and water. You make a little soapy water, and if you're not sure if something can be soaked completely underwater, you just wet a damp cloth and you just wipe the surface of those toys. Let them air dry in between use. And you do that once a week or so, or whenever they start to look kind of gunky, and that's enough.
Jadira, when I was younger, right, and I hate to say back in the day, they used to tell us that some germs were good for us. Have times changed? I mean, is there a difference now than it was back then?
Absolutely not. That is absolutely still the case. That is why experts recommend regular cleaning over sanitizing, unless you absolutely have to. We're told all the time not to use antibacterial dish soap. We shouldn't use antibacterial hand soap because you don't want to overdo it. Those germs are good for you. They're helping your immune system to fight off viruses and bacteria that you may encounter in the future. If they don't encounter them at all, then our body doesn't know how to fight them.
Right. So, it was all right being a little bit germy. We had mud pies and things like that.
That's right.
Jadira Rodriguez, really appreciate you being with us. Thanks for your insight. For close to a half a century, this building served as one of the most unique to grace the Atlanta skyline. It started out as the Omni International Complex in 1976, but in 1987, the cable news network moved in and the site was renamed the CNN Center. But last year, CNN completed a move back to its roots at the Techwood campus over in Midtown. That opened the door for commercial real estate firm CP Group to bring new life to the historic building. Here to discuss the project is Chris Ekus. He is the founding partner of CP Group. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. Glad you came in. And tell us about this unique building. What makes the building so unique?
I mean, it's a landmark. So I think, we've been super excited for a few years now that we've owned it. to really get started on the redevelopment of the project and deliver something incredible for downtown Atlanta.
What made you guys look at this particular building? Is it just because of its location, or you're saying it's just an icon, so you just kind of scoop it up? What made you go for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the above, right? So I think it's an intersection of timing and opportunity here. And as you look at downtown Atlanta, specifically kind of the entertainment district that surrounds us down there with the convention center, all the arenas, all the excitement with the park, it's a great time to get this project back and get started on kind of relaunching that entire energy in that corridor.
Share with us what you can about your plans.
Yeah, so we have a lot going on. So if anybody's been down there recently, you'll see there's a lot of construction happening. We just kicked off back in December, about $35 million worth of renovation work, really focused on some visually stunning LED billboards that you'll see on the side of the building. We've done massive renovations to the entrances, both facing the convention center and the Centennial Olympic Park Drive side. The interior of the project's getting underway shortly as well. We've got some restaurants underway. A lot of exciting things. It'll be a place where the community can really get together before, after, during all the exciting events that happen in downtown and enjoy themselves with their family and friends.
Yeah, we were looking at some of the renderings as you were speaking. And is there anything, now you've seen this building obviously prior to what you guys are about to do. Is there any parts of it that you'll try to keep just for historic value, or will you just completely renovate it?
No, there's absolutely. And I think, I don't want to give away all the surprises, but I think there'll be some exciting parts that are a bit of a nod to the legacy there. That we intend to kind of keep and restore to their former glory. But it's been really exciting to get to work on this project. And I think knowing that most of the viewers here probably have been in this project at some point, I think they're going to be very excited with a lot of the improvements we're going to make and really make it something that's sort of the 2.0 version of the community gathering spot in downtown Atlanta.
I was just about to ask you, and again, not trying to give it all away, but could we compare it to? Like, will it be something totally unique that we've never seen before, or what would it be comparative to without you giving too much away?
Of course, yeah. I think as you look around, Atlanta, the Southeast, or even the United States, there's a lot of very successful mixed-use projects, and so we've spent a ton of time these last few years really studying a lot of those projects and kind of cherry picking out what we think are kind of the best attributes, and then working with some really, really great designers and architects to implement them in a way that's unique for Atlanta. So we've been bringing in some of the local Atlanta art scene, working with a lot of local restaurants and vendors on that side, but then also we'll sprinkle in some of the more national type brands. So I don't think it'll be revolutionary from a standpoint of a real estate development, but I think it'll be something that'll be really refreshing and enjoyable. And we're really trying to aim to satisfy the entire demographic that is all over downtown Atlanta, which is super exciting because when you look at all the tourism that this city brings in.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Atlanta's the 4th largest tourism city in the United States. So you get a lot of people from all over the country and the world that come through that area. So we're really trying to serve that entire customer base.
Speaking of which, we got some big time events coming to Atlanta in the future here. You got the World Cup coming next year, right? We got a future Super Bowl. We got the NCAA Final Four, et cetera, et cetera. Are you under a time crunch to get it done before these events come in?
We're in the real estate business. We're always in a time crunch. No, but seriously speaking, you highlight a lot of the great events. But what I've realized is that between State Farm Arena, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and the Convention Center, there's always something going on in downtown. And yes, faster is better. So World Cup obviously is a very large one, as you point out. But there's a lot of other things going on. So yeah, we are under a very tight timeline to deliver all these things, and are excited that hammers are swinging down there, and we'll get it done quickly.
Chris, really appreciate you joining us on the show today, man.
This is great. I appreciate you having me.
All right, can't wait to see the new product. This week, Governor Brian Kemp asks Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to train officers with the Georgia Department of Public Safety. That's 1,100 officers with the State Patrol and Capitol Police, also Highway Safety, to learn how to identify and detain people who are in the country illegally. In his statement, Governor Kemp said, quote, "This is another common sense measure on top of those I've already put into place since I've been in office to enable hardworking law enforcement to assist and identify and apprehending legal aliens who pose a risk to public safety." The plan has been met with opposition, saying this would empower local law enforcement agencies to use heavy-handed and biased methods without repercussions. Here to talk more about it is Kyle Gomez-Lineweber, who is the Public Policy and Advocacy for Galileo and Galileo Impact Fund. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Kyle, first of all, talk to me about your thoughts on the governor's plan.
Yeah, we have a number of concerns with the plan. The Galileo Impact Fund has a long-standing history of opposing 287G partnerships because of the impact we feel that it has on our community from racial profiling to also making our community members feel less safe and less likely to contact law enforcement when they're being victimized, when they're experiencing crime. And then there's another, this, announcement from the governor's office opens or creates a number of questions. Typically, 287G agreements are partnerships between the federal government and the local governments or local entities that operate jails. The Department of Public Safety doesn't, to our awareness, operate or is responsible for the administration of any jails. So, where's DPS? Where are they going to bring, undocumented or people that they believe to be undocumented? Of course, in the first Trump administration, we saw more than 600 U.S. citizens placed in ICE detainers through 287G agreements. And then finally, there's the financial piece. Government, local governments, state governments have to actually use and spend local tax dollars to participate in 287G agreements. So we have a number of concerns with this announcement.
Yeah, you talked about some of those concerns, the dangers. Are there any more? What else do you see if this plan actually goes through?
Well, I mean, again, there's a question of, using state resources to train DPS officers who don't operate or administer any of the jails operating in the state of Georgia. Is it a good use of funds? Does it make our community safer? We believe it doesn't, because we've seen that when local entities enter into 287G agreements, when laws like, for example, 1105 from last session or SB 21, which is up for consideration this session, are passed that target immigrant communities, that actually leads to an underreporting of crime, which makes all of us less safe.
What do you see as an alternative, or what would you offer up? Would you see any middle ground in this at all?
Well, we just don't think that using funds to, coordinate with ICE is the best use of state resources. We feel that if you actually want to make a community safer, you need to take the time and resources to invest in building trustful relationships between all segments of your community, so that everyone in our community can come out of the shadows. And that way it's actually easier to find and target those bad actors who are a threat to everyone in our society.
All right. Kyle Gomez, Line Weather, really appreciate you joining us today and giving us your insight. Appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Court documents filed yesterday shows 18 departments and agencies are working to reinstate workers to comply with recent court orders, but many employees that are being reinstated won't go back to their jobs. Instead, they're being placed on administrative leave as bosses wait to see whether or not these orders will be overturned. Now, with concerns still strong for federal workers potentially losing their jobs, Fulton County officers are now saying if you're let go by the feds, come talk to us. Joining us now live on the show is Chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, Rob Pitts. Commissioner Pitts, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. Give us what's backing you guys trying to bring in more of these federal workers that lost their jobs?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, there are a number of what I believe experienced, professional, competent Fulton County residents who have been laid off, dismissed, resigned, whatever the reason, as a result of DOGE, and that we have, at the same time, we at Fulton County have some 800 vacant positions. These are positions that are authorized, they're funded, but they're vacant. So I'm trying to marry the two together and to give preference to those DOGE, what I call DOGE, former DOGE people who were let go for various reasons, but who are residents of Fulton County, give them an opportunity to apply here for the 800 vacancies that we have here at Fulton County. In addition to Fulton County, it's my belief that the other 15 cities in Fulton County also have a number of vacancies, as well as at the school board, Atlanta Public School System, Fulton County School System, and even the private sector. So that was my idea, and I'll be bringing a resolution before the board today to really to codify what I have in mind. And so we're already getting any number of calls already from people who are inquiring as to how do I go about it. They think it's a great deal. Give you a little story. I was in the St. Patrick's Day parade on Saturday, and I had any number, about 10 people who recognized me and ran up to the vehicle that I was riding in, asking me, well, how do I apply? I'm a Doge worker, so please let me know what I need to do.
Wow, yeah, you said come talk to us. Now, you mentioned that you're a Fulton County resident. Are there any other requirements to be eligible for the job?
Well, you have to meet the qualifications, obviously, but if you are a Fulton County resident and you can prove that you were displaced, fired, forced to resign, whatever the case may be, as a result of Doge, you come to and apply to us, and you will come to the front of the line. But you have to meet the requirements of the position. They're very competent, I believe, people who are in this situation, and just marrying these two. We have a need, and there's a supply out there. Marrying the two, bringing the two together.
You said people have already approached you about it, which is obviously a good sign.
I've had again at that parade, we've had people calling our human resources and personnel department as well.
Have there been any other counties outside of yours that have contacted you about this program?
I'm not aware of that, but I have had representatives from at least two of the 15 cities in Fulton County to do so. In fact, one said, why don't we have a job fair specifically designed for the Doge, what I call Doge workers.
Oh, okay, if this goes through, how long will you offer the option?
Well, as long as it takes, as long as we have vacancies, as long as what's happening in Washington continues, because there will always be a need for qualified, competent people, professional people, and it's my belief that there are a plethora of those folk who are so-called Doge workers.
So, yeah, I'm sure that after this, a lot of people will be contacting you as well. So, again, you said this has to be approved first and then it will go through. Is that what you're saying?
Pardon me?
You said it has to be approved first and then it will go through, or?
You said, what did you say, approved?
You said you were going before, you had to go before.
Oh, no, I have what's called a resolution today to go before the board, to ask the board to vote for it in favor of it, and I anticipate that it will pass.
Okay.
That will simply give specific instruction to our Human Resources Director, Personnel Department to proceed. They already have the program set up.
Gotcha. And so, yeah, it'll be ready to go, and then people can start applying for jobs. Very good. Commissioner Pitts, really appreciate you joining us on the show today and giving us your insight.
Thank you. Anytime.
All right. Take care. All right. Welcome back to the show. We have Chris Arnone here with me. And Chris, can you hear me now?
Yes. Good morning, Chester.
Good.
How are you?
Good to see you, man. Thanks for being on the show with us. We were talking about tort reform, and maybe a lot of people don't understand what's all involved with tort reform. Break it down for us if you could.
Yeah, basically what this bill that's been proposed is going to change is really three things. It would be first how businesses can have a lawsuit. Second would be how lawyers can argue a lawsuit, and then third would be how damages would be awarded in a lawsuit. So it's going to be a pretty significant change if it's passed.
What would be the impacts on businesses? Maybe what's the direct connection should this measure pass?
Yeah, right now, Georgia is known as one of the best, if not the best, business-friendly states, with the exception right now of the insurance area. It's considered really a judicial hellhole right now. And as we work with middle market and closely held businesses here at our firm, they're faced with significant rising insurance costs. So the idea behind this bill is to level the playing field a little bit in that area. Give businesses some more avenues to defend themselves but still providing some, reasonable awards and avenues for those that have been injured. So really to curb insurance costs, that's really the hope here.
If passed, would it have a wide reach, you think?
It absolutely would. And if you look at the key industries in Georgia, if you think of the Savannah port, trucking and transportation, you think at retail, medical, the medical community, convenience stores, and even farming in Georgia. Those are all industries that have been facing a significant rise in insurance costs. So it would be a pretty widespread impact if it's passed.
This legislative session, this has been the big thing, tort reform. We've been hearing about it. Why do you think the governor's putting so much behind this?
Well, I think a couple things. They've tried to have some reform for several years now, and they haven't been able to get any movement. So I think he's really put his foot down here. He realizes that this is a significant issue. It's estimated to be as much as a $15 billion impact on the state. A recent study suggested that Georgia residents pay as much of it as a $2,000 insurance tax, meaning that the insurance costs we pay are that much more than other states. So he realizes that while there's a lot of good things happening in Georgia, this is an area that needs improvement.
All right, we'll see what happens today. Chris Arnone, thanks for joining us this morning and giving us your insight. Really appreciate you.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right. The Federal Reserve staying cautious and holding interest rates steady, remaining about 4.5%. Analysts say Wednesday's decision shows central bankers are waiting to see how the Trump administration policy will have an impact on the U.S. economy. Even though inflation is holding around 2.5% or 2.8%, most consumers see inflation as cumulative, stretching back to the pandemic. It was a point not lost on Fed Chairman Jerome Powell.
The grocery bill is about past inflation, really. There was inflation in 21, 2, and 3, and prices went up. The current level, it's not the change in prices. It's they're unhappy, and they're not wrong to be unhappy that prices went up quite a bit, and they're paying a lot for those things.
All this has one word starting to creep back into our lives for the first time in roughly half a century: stagflation. Here to make sense of it all is Atlanta-based financial expert Andrew Poulos. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Chesley. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Let's start off with stagflation. What is that?
It's a word we haven't heard in a long time, but essentially stagflation is not good. That could potentially tell us that we're headed into an economy where rising inflation is getting worse, economic growth is slowing down or becomes stagnant, and of course, unemployment begins to rise. So the combination of those three just would not be good economically.
How real would you say this concern should be?
I think it's a real concern. Obviously, you can see that the Fed refuses to lower rates. I shouldn't say refuses, but essentially is very, very cautious. In December, there was one Fed president that said there would be no rate cuts in 2025. Now, as of yesterday's meeting, if you look at the minutes of the meeting, there's 4 Fed presidents that don't see a rate cut in 2025, even though Fed Chairman Powell said that they still see 2 rate cuts on the table. So I think they're just being very cautious because they don't want inflation to creep back up. But of course, we're also starting to see unemployment. We're starting to see large employers and small businesses take hits, and unemployment is going to begin to rise.
Listening to the Fed chair yesterday, did he give any comments that may have tipped his hand into which way he may be headed?
Well, based on the market sentiment yesterday, you can see after the Fed chairman spoke, the market rallied to end the day. This morning, futures are down, so we're going to see how it's going to work out today. But essentially, the market sort of is taking the tip that 2 rate cuts are coming, and if economic growth slows down, that the Fed will be forced to do possibly more than 2 rate cuts. Of course, again, the Fed's you can just tell based on his words, he's being very cautious. They don't want to start cutting rates more prematurely and have inflation go through the roof again.
Here in Metro Atlanta, what kind of signs should we be looking for to see how we should manage our pocketbooks, do you think?
Look, as a consumer, you got to be very cautious. You got to manage your money well. You need to have 3 to 6 months of an emergency savings fund. You got to be able to manage for yourself, because if we do hit rocky times, unemployment begins to rise, inflation continues to go higher, and growth slows down, which is apparently what is looking like it's happening right now. We may get into some bumpy times the second half of 2025 and certainly beginning of 26.
Gotcha. You know, going back to Washington today marks 2 months that President Trump has been in office for his second term. How do you think the relationship between he and the Feds have been? Any bad blood between the president and the Fed chair?
That's a great question, Chesley. Well, I think part of what the strategy is with tariffs for President Trump is to bring down and use tariffs essentially to slow down the economy, to force the Fed to cut rates. Obviously, that's, you know, anyone who can read between the lines can read that the White House, that is their focus right now, is to get the Federal Reserve to cut rates, which they are very stubborn to do. And so I think there's a clash there. Some of it is politics, but we're going to see how it's going to play out probably in the next couple of months.
It's getting into everything, you know. Politics is getting into everything, man. Even car buying, right? You know. So you may know this, may not know this. When is the next Fed meeting, and by then could we expect the cuts to happen? Then, do you know? I
think, look, I'm going off memory. I think the next one's going to be in June, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I don't, based on what I read yesterday and what I'm seeing, I don't think really that the Fed is inclined to cut rates. If they do, probably until the September meeting. Again, anything can happen. Look, if we hit a rough patch over the next 2-3 months, between now and the next Fed meeting, and unemployment shoots up and economic growth gets worse than what they're seeing right now, anticipating, the Fed can cut rates at any time, even as we've seen before historically. They could be in emergency rate cuts. I don't see that happening right now, but I'm sure the Fed is very cautious and, again, keeping a very close eye on the growth, the economic growth, which they even mentioned yesterday that they're starting to see coming down, and they've actually lowered their expectations for the year.
Let me ask you this, Andrew. What role does the White House play in this?
Look, Chesley, the White House sort of plays a big role because you can see President Trump came in. You can see what they call as President Trump 2.0 versus 1.0, first administration, second administration, first administration. President Trump was all about the markets, making sure the markets don't get spooked, don't get rocked. I mean, that was his daily focus, so to speak. Now it's, he really doesn't care about the market. It's as if he's trying to bring the markets down to create some volatility and pressure the Fed to cut rates. So I think the White House, with everything that they're doing, their ammunition is to create slow growth, increase unemployment, basically, and of course try to cause inflation to come down so the Fed can cut rates and create another boom in the economy. But look, is it going to play out like that? It's just too early to tell because President Trump's only been in the White House now for 2 months.
After 9 months in space, Commander Suni Williams and Captain Butch Wilmore are home safe and sound. Their SpaceX capsule landed safely off the coast of Florida Tuesday evening. Now the work begins to settle their bodies back to life on Earth, and that's something that Emory University has been studying for some time now. With more on this out-of-this-world research, Bill Dinan, a professor emeritus at Emory's Department of Radiation Oncology, joins us now. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks.
All right, now you've been studying this, looking at astronauts' health and performance during long-term space missions. Talk to me about why this study was commissioned.
My specialty is hazards of space radiation. We know that there is some risk of elevated risk of cancer for people exposed to space radiation. We know that radiation is everywhere in space. But we do have some good news for these astronauts that have returned from the International Space Station. They really get a lot less radiation dose than astronauts would get on a journey, say, to Mars or living on a moon base, because they're in orbit close to the Earth. They're protected by the Earth's magnetic field, so their risk is going to be small. It's going to be sort of on the same order as from medical imaging. Right? It's not zero, but they're really going to be in pretty good shape. There are other aspects of the space environment that are harmful to health. The big one, of course, is what we call microgravity, altered gravitational field. Undoubtedly, they're adjusting now to being back on Earth and to feeling the effects of Earth gravity. One of the real triumphs of the space station program has been the opportunity to study the effects of gravity or loss of gravity, altered gravity, and also to develop countermeasures, which we've gotten a lot better about over the last years. An example of a countermeasure would be exercise, for example, to prevent muscle loss or bone loss in space.
When we look at the pictures, it doesn't look like a big space that they're in. You mentioned exercise, and then obviously the weightlessness, gravity. Which will they search them for first? Will they look at the radiation first, or will they look at the effects on gravity first when they first come back and they're checking them out?
Well, gravity's the big one.
Okay.
There are other aspects, many other hazards in space. One of them is the closed environment. They do the best they can to maintain a good breathable atmosphere on the International Space Station, but it's not perfectly like Earth. So that's a big one that the space station has taught us how to regulate that environment. It must be, as you say, it's not a huge space. It is quite a bit bigger than what people envision for a trip to Mars, for example, which would be something like 3 years in a Winnebago. The International Space Station is bigger than that. But there is psychologically, it must be interesting, must be difficult to be in this space with a lot of noisy machinery. You have the same roommates for 6 months. So of course, NASA screens its astronauts very carefully to find people that are amenable to that kind of social situation.
Is it true that we grow older in space? We've been hearing that for a while. Is that true?
Well, we grow older everywhere, right?
Or is it faster in space, I guess, or is it slower in space?
There's interest in the idea that the higher doses of radiation that you might encounter in deep space, away from the Earth's protective magnetic field, might accelerate aging, that we might see the diseases of aging accelerated. But really, there's some work that you can do in animals, some suggestion of aging, but really we won't know until people go and we see what happens.
How long will it be, the last question for you, how long will it be before they get checked out that they get a chance to get back to their families and friends and that kind of thing? Is it a long-term testing or is it really short?
I think it's short nowadays. We have so much experience now with the readjustment to coming back to Earth. We have good countermeasures for the health effects that they'd see in space. So I don't think we've been told by NASA how long they'll be examined. And like anybody else, astronauts' medical information is private. But hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah, especially being out there that long in space, I'm sure they want to get back to somewhat normalcy. Yeah, Bill, thanks so much. Yeah, Bill, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insight. We really appreciate it. Shout out to Ben Affleck for giving his son a reality check. While at a sneaker convention, his son wanted a pair of $6,000 sneakers. That's right, $6,000 for a pair of sneakers. Ben shared with his 13-year-old son, that's a lot of lawns that you're going to have to cut. His son proceeded to say, "We have the money, Dad." Ben followed that up with saying, "No, I have the money, you're broke." Gotta love that. Parents that fight against their children growing up to be entitled or spoiled. Other celebrities who share that same sentiment will be Shaquille O'Neal. You got Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Tucker, Warren Buffett. I'm not trying to tell you how to raise your kids, folks, but helping them to appreciate what they're given will help them out in the long run in life. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. $6,000 for a pair of sneakers that he's gonna grow out of in probably a month or a couple of months. Thanks for joining us today, folks. As we say goodbye, here's your moment of Zen.